Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, a pretty fun question from a listener for Word Nerd Emily Brewster, when we get to examine the function of the word pretty.
And it has nothing to do with two kisses or falling, but if we're looking for pretty music, Tanglewood has got a pretty perfect vocal program for that.
Where you just might end up learning something pretty cool about history, too.
Home here, little one. Home and rest your head. He won't be long now, so the
On Sunday, July 27th, you'll have a unique opportunity to expand your view of vocal music at Tanglewood. The program, African Queens, looks at the queens of African history from various nations and peoples through a series of 9 works distinctly commissioned under this theme by a collaborative of organizations and orchestra ensembles.
And at the helm, both creatively and performance-wise, is soprano Karen Slack. Karen Slack is not only one of the nation's most celebrated sopranos, but a leading voice in changing and making space in classical music. A native Philadelphian, Slack is a graduate of the prestigious Curtis Institute of Music and the San Francisco Opera's Marola Opera program, who has performed on the stages of the Metropolitan Opera, Lyric Opera of Chicago, Washington National Opera, Scottish Opera, and many others.
She made her Carnegie Hall debut with the Orchestra of St. Luke's and performed as a soloist with the Philadelphia Orchestra in the world premiere of Hannibal Lacombe's Healing Tones, and has since performed with many other orchestras worldwide.
A recipient of the 2022 Sphinx Medal of Excellence, Slack is an artistic advisor for Portland Opera, serves on the board of the American Composers Orchestra and Astral Artists, and holds a faculty position at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity in Alberta, Canada. And her solo album, Beyond the Years, which explores an unpublished work of Florence Price, won the 2025 Grammy for Best Classical Solo Vocal Album. Thank you for joining us, Karen Slack.
Thank you for having me.
And congrats on the Grammy, because I also love Florence Price and her work, and so your album was just beautiful. But when we were looking at the Tanglewood schedule for the summer, this is a program that immediately jumped out at me, because I am always looking for faces we don't always see in that space. So what was your call to classical music and to opera?
I fell in love with opera when I was 14 years old. I'm originally from Philadelphia, born and raised. I live there. I still live in Philadelphia. And in my city, we have orchestra, opera, jazz, all the schools. There's always music in the city. But opera, I loved because it was grand. It's big and loud and, great theater, etc. But as a kid, I always had like a big, high, loud voice. And opera was the genre that it pulled on me. I went to the Philadelphia High School for Creative and Performing Arts, and my choral teacher loved opera, and he would play opera singers blasted at 7:30 in the morning every morning. And so I just fell in love with opera. And at 16 years old, I got to see my first opera live, and it was Denise Graves singing Carmen. And it just changed my life to see that beautiful Black woman up on that stage just commanding. And it made me believe that it was possible for me to have a career in opera.
Just goes to show you how much representation matters, because we would not have necessarily Karen Slack doing the things that she's doing right now if it wasn't for that early experience. This coming Sunday, July 27th, the African Queens at Tanglewood.
I have to stop myself before I ask you about misogyny and misogynoir in opera, because that's a long conversation, because you mentioned Carmen, and I love Carmen, but Carmen is like the perfect example of like woman living her own life and then some dude just coming around and killing her because he can't have her, can't own her. Yeah. And that just happens over and over. There's so little agency for women in opera. Anyway.
Listen, that's a whole other episode, you know what I mean? And And also, like, the artists who get to say to have a say at the table for the stories that get greenlit. And if you have everybody at the table that is, they don't even know what massage noir is, they have no idea what that is, and then you get presented with a story, an opportunity to create a role, and you're like, I don't want to sing about this.
Yeah.
This is why all the things are wrong. Even in new works now, there are very few stories that could rival African Queens. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
They just don't get chosen,
That,
unfortunately. But it is who is at the table that gets to choose the creative team and the stories that get told and all these things. And I don't want to. I feel like I was a little critical, but I have to be. I have to take these opportunities to talk about the things that could be better and why they should be better.
Tell us about the idea behind this project, that you wanted to focus on 9 historical African queens and then tell their story through the means of opera.
Yes. So African Queens was born literally out of like frustration and disappointment that there were not enough characters for women, for Black women, that did not center men and that also did not paint us as victims of a circumstance of some man, as I say. And as I was curating various recitals and then doing a lot of new works, I just said, I can't wait for a company to come to me and say, do you have an idea? Because oftentimes singers don't get those invitations. I knew that the chamber music space, the recital spaces, the concert spaces are a lot more flexible than in opera. It takes a lot longer to create a whole opera. It takes years to make an opera. So what I did was I started doing my research about 8 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, about Black women who had done extraordinary things in history. I started researching the continent. And so I found one story after another story after another story, and I just was blown away. And I'm like, why aren't people writing about this? And so I approached my managers and said, I have this idea for an evening of song that features 7 African queens. So we have 9 composers and 7 queens are represented in this evening. It's extraordinary. And I really wanted it to be culturally centered around Blackness and Black art. That's why there's spoken word in there. That's why there's a little rhythm in there. Every composer chose their own queen. And so it is a very distinctive sound from each composer. But at the core of this piece is my voice. And I don't shy away from the fullness and majesty of my big operatic sound. I'm not trying to go out there and sound like, Whitney Houston or, Anita Baker or Ella Fitzgerald, which, again, like those are extraordinary women in their own spaces. And so I bring my own soulfulness to this piece, and it has just been extraordinarily received by every audience we've presented. So
well, can I get you to talk a little bit about the queens that were selected? Because I'm curious if the composers that you were working with, like if you gave them a list and you're like, choose from this, or if they came to you with their own, having also done a little bit of research, being intrigued by the project.
Hey, I go all the way back. I gotta give you the whole story. So during pandemic, I started this Facebook Live show called Kiki Conversations. And every Thursday at 8 o'clock, we would come together on Facebook Live and I would interview artists about their career. What I wanted to do is demystify opera for audiences because everybody was home. And I know I had my own audience of people who knew who I was. But of course, there are people who don't really know opera singers personally. And I wanted to just, have real conversations like the conversations that we have when we're on a gig and we go to, the happy hour or like the, hotel bar, or you have a drink and, just get to know each other. And it became very successful, very fast. After a couple of months, a month or two of doing the shows, we come up into the murder of George Floyd. And I was doing a Facebook Live show, I think the next day or 2 days after we all got to see this murder on television. And I said, I cannot go with my glass of wine and laugh and talk about people's careers. So I leaned into talking about the issues in classical music, the inequality, the racism, the sexism, all of those things. And it changed my career. And so every week I would go on again, like it was daily, like the companies were blacking out the boxes on social media, they were over promising all of these things and all this stuff, and people had no idea of the things that we were experiencing as artists, as Black artists in these very white spaces. So fast forward, I decided to bring 7 Black composers on my show as one of the episodes, and I had my dear friend Terrence Blanchard moderate
Wow.
that. We're making space. We are leveling the playing field by having these 7 young Black composers sit with Mr. Blanchard and talk and just have the conversations. Some of them didn't know each other, and some knew each other, like, slightly familiar. And so after the conversation, they became a collective, right? And they lovingly named themselves the Blacknificent Seven.
Yes.
and I love it because I do take credit for putting together the classical music's Wu-Tang Clan. I call them the Wu-Tang Clan of classical music because they each have their superpower. They're all brilliant in their own right, just like the Wu, and each can rock their own situation without the other, but they're powerful together. And so I'm very, as an avid hip hop fan for my whole life. Anyway, and one of the composers approached me after the interview and said, we want to write a song for you. And I said, well, I have a better idea. Let's get a Zoom together and I'll present my idea. And I presented the idea of a song cycle of the African Queens. And they immediately said, yes, yes, yes. Everybody said yes. And okay, then once they said yes, I had to figure out, like, oh crap, now I got to figure out how to put this whole thing together. Like, okay, now I'm the boss, right? I got to figure out how to move the pieces on the chessboard. So I had approached a young librettist, a young countertenor who I had been following on Facebook. I'd never met him in person or anything, but he would post these beautiful poems. And so one day he posted something and I said, listen, kid, call me. I got a project for you. And I pitched the idea to him and he immediately said yes. So he became my creative director, my collaborator in getting together the information for each queen and providing the poetry to either submit to the composer or use a spoken word. And so when I think we got 20 queens together and presented it to each composer. And some chose from the list and others chose queens that were more personal to them. Like Jessie Montgomery, who's a brilliant composer, hot composer today. Her name is Nzinga. Her middle name is Nzinga. And so she chose Queen Nzinga, of course. Damien Jeter chose the great warrior queen Amani Renas, who was the one-eyed queen of Kush. She was the queen that defeated Caesar. And I knew he was going to pick Amani Renas because he's an opera composer and her story is very grand. Then there's Sean Okopepelo, who chose his great-great-great-grandmother, Queen Ufua.
Wow.
So these are just personal stories. It's an incredible. It's from very personal stories to stories that just resonated with each composer.
It's such a cool sounding program, all of the previews that I've heard of it. More with the amazing presence that is soprano Karen Slack on her upcoming performance of African Queens as we get more into the performance itself and some of the not so glamorous nuts and bolts of putting a program like this together.
And later, senior editor Merriam Webster tackles a listener question about the use of the word pretty. You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family business with experienced craftsmen offering wood, vinyl, and composite windows. WindowWorldOfWesternMA.com.
We are speaking about African Queens, which will be performed at Tanglewood this Sunday, July 27th. And we're speaking with the person who came up with this idea, the Grammy Award-winning soprano, opera singer Karen Slack, who will be performing this at Tanglewood next weekend. It sounds
so
amazing.
Cool. Like, just
It is a very cool project. Yes.
I'm curious, Karen, is there, these are figures that some people may have known about before, but I would think probably the vast public does not know these historical stories, and that's part of why you're bringing these incredible stories to light. Is there one of these queens whose story you weren't that familiar with before, but that you are now, so glad to know about the history of these African queens, and then bringing that history musically to the stage through this opera?
All of them. I did not know, and I spoke about this in the talk back session in Rockport, we just did Rockport Newport festivals this past weekend. I said I was pissed that I didn't know.
Yeah.
So angry that I did not know these women. Of course, we know Cleopatra and hot Shepsuit, all the Egyptian queens. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's because they're tangential to the Roman Empire.
Right.
So,
or they're in the Bible, like the Queen of Sheba, things like that. Yeah.
So, it's still under white lens.
Absolutely. And again, we know, and one of the composers, Dave Ragland, chose Queen of Sheba, and Dave tends to write more sacred music, so I knew he was going to pick Sheba, right? But again, arguably, was she a real queen, or wasn't she not? Depending on the Bible and whose opinion about whether or not she was actually a real queen or not, whatever. There's just a whole kind of pisses me off. But what I did not want to do was choose queens that were familiar. Cleopatra has 2 operas, and she doesn't need another opera. And I shouldn't say that, but she didn't need another space. I think we needed to recenter Nubian queens because there's so many. Joel Thompson, wonderful composer, chose Queen Nani because he's half Jamaican, and so we know Queen Nani of the Maroons. We are familiar with that with that story. I mean, not in depth, but we should be.
Look a little close, baby, but you will find your way. Don't worry if you either but wrong, so just listen what you like. She said, "Come here, go on, come and rest your head. It won't be long now, so the Baba said, come here, go on, come and rest your head. It won't be long now, so the Baba said."
There are some queens, the more controversial ones that the composers didn't choose. I still am an advocate for Ranavalona, who was the queen of Madagascar. They call her the female Caligula because she murdered 2 million of her people. Now I say this, Madagascar was one of the last countries in Africa that was colonized because she would murder you if she thought that you were treasonous. Now, am I an advocate for that? Not necessarily.
I'm glad to hear it.
Is telling the story. Is that the whole story? And they stepped away from some of the more controversial ones. Okay, fine. I'll just have to do Queen's Part 2 to
I can't wait.
That was actually going to be my next question. This feels like you had a much longer list and that it would be an ongoing project. Do you see working with some of these ensembles that came to commission this to create a much longer, more malleable work in terms of putting a program together? Because once you have more pieces, you can tell different stories with every night that you decide to perform it and have more wealth, more catalog to choose from to tell those histories that you want to tell in any given certain night.
Absolutely. I would love to do this project again, to build it out again, to do a part 2 or 2.0. I would, if someone in your listening audience wants to come on as a producer and fund African Queens Part Two, we can get together. Call me.
Well, we know that Tanglewood and the BSO will be listening to this conversation, and they already helped to fund the first round, so I think they're a good potential partner for round two.
Amen. Amen. Well, I never build projects to only do one reiteration. And I learned that by watching someone like a Beyonce or a Madonna or women who are really hands-on with the curation of what they do. Like every piece needs to live in multiple spaces. And so actually African Queens is getting an orchestral suite next season.
Nice.
So all the new pieces will be condensed down to 25, 30 minute suite. So those audiences will be able to hear those new works in another, with another soundscape. So that is amazing. And that's something that I always dreamed of from the very beginning, to maybe create the new piece that is more multidisciplinary. So instead of it being the formal recital space, maybe monodrama type where there's slightly more staging, a little bit more spoken word. Yes, there are many possibilities when it comes to when you have a great subject matter, you can do whatever with it. And sometimes the confines of classical music doesn't allow for you to expand out because people think, okay, now we have this product, it's done, packaged and go. But it's like in other genres, they understand that it is just the beginning. When you curate something, when you create something, it can have multiple lives. It's just a seed that you water and you see this beautiful garden become all of these different things. And I think sometimes in classical music, we're so obsessed with the finished product, and it hinders us from even building audiences in that way. And I'm not sorry to say that, it's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about the money, and I'm sorry, but there's a lot of folks that help to commission this work.
Mm-hmm.
Was it difficult navigating through all of the things that, like, or did they have any say in where their money went, or are they just basically putting in the money so that they can reap the benefit of a performance later in their season?
That's a beautiful question. That's a good question for audiences, because what the art of the commission, right? I had really no idea, coming from the traditional opera space where you wait to get casts from an opera company, you get paid per performance. It's a whole different model versus in the chamber music space or the concert space, where what happened was that I presented the concept to my managers, and my managers then goes to the presenters, the Ravinias, Tanglewood, Aspen, Washington Performing Arts, and they pitch the idea of building the commission consortium, which pays each composer, right? So that building of the consortium not only guarantees me multiple performances, but it goes to pay for the commission of the composers. And so that is really how the business side. And I hate to say it, there's not a lot of monies that people make necessarily when they're producing, because the model of classical is non-for-profit, which is it's not a non-for-profit industry. It is definitely for profit. So we need to change the business model, so that it's no shade. Yes, we want to make money off of these things. Yes, I want to continue to make money as a producer off of the things that I want to do. We are like the last ones. Everybody else has figured that out.
Art ain't free, y'all.
Yeah.
It's not free. It's not free, and it's not cheap. But you don't want to go into the store and buy fake Gucci and fake Prada and fake Louis Vuitton and Balenciaga. You want the best. You have to pay for the best. You have to pay for quality. This is a quality product that I have produced, and it should reach as many people as possible. I was talking to one of my dear, I was talking to one of my dear friends last night, and also Barry Schiffman, who is the executive director of the Rockport Festival. And he said, this should have a 50-city tour.
Yeah.
this piece, and he's not even a producer. He wasn't even a commissioner. He was someone who just came on. His organization came on, and I said, "Yeah, it should." Yeah, I think we miss out on the funding as well of outside of the same resources that we always choose if we continue to uphold the system as it is, because each audience need to have new stories. I don't care who you are. There are more opportunities to be inspired by multiple people who don't look like us. So.
That part too. And every story that comes out doesn't necessarily have to relive trauma.
Yeah.
Like there can be stories about like the happiness across the board for people, period. People need to see joy also.
Yes.
Yeah. And
they do.
Badass hero queens from Africa.
Exactly.
Exactly. And that's right. And that's the biggest criticism now of most of the stories. I have I pitched the idea of the story of Gladys Bentley. She was the first drag king of the Harlem Renaissance. She's a native Philadelphian like myself, so her story resonated with me. And the Dallas Symphony is premiering a 25-minute piece that I'm singing with them based off of part of her life. And it was a very difficult sell for my team. That I don't know when they went into those spaces how they spoke about it, because I was not there. But the idea to have a queer Black woman who was this big grand woman who did an extraordinary thing, like why isn't her story as important to tell, to share? There are so many people, particularly today, that had the same struggles that woman had in 1930 that would resonate. You have to put stories out there, because that is how you build audiences. That is how you get people intrigued, like, oh, what we're doing. But it was a hard sell for some commissioners. I'm like, why? We all struggle with identity in some form or fashion. It doesn't have to just be about sexuality, but this absolutely has to be. And so, people would ask me, why would you want to? You're not a queer woman. Why are you telling this story? And I'm like, because I'm a storyteller, and I want to tell all stories. And this woman deserves to have representation. I don't have to be of the community to know. You know what I mean? Like that I can represent that too. And so again, that's a whole other conversation, a whole other all of those things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You don't have to be of the community to have the story resonate with you. Like just let the
Period.
resonate. Like that's how human connection works.
But again, in classical music, I don't know if we understand that. And not just in classical spaces. You have to take the art and put it in other spaces. This is America. We have so many venues. And not just concert halls or, performing arts centers. Put it in a 200, 250 seat concert space that rock people get to go into. And that's how you build audiences.
Well, as somebody who runs a nonprofit theater in Turners Falls, you're welcome anytime to bring this. We would love to see that. Meanwhile,
that would be
my
amazing.
pianist and I would love to come.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you can see it at the legendary Tanglewood, Sunday, July 27th.
We talked about it a little bit earlier, but can you talk about the different feeling in performance and perhaps in audience engagement between like opera, Big O, and like recitals?
Absolutely. Opera is, I always say, the grandest art form of them all, because it incorporates, librettos and music, orchestral music, singing, set design, costume design. It incorporates all of the arts, the visual, the performing, the creative, all those things. And so opera is just much larger space, and also requires larger voices to be able to carry into these large spaces over the orchestra into the large space. What I love, and I love it, it's my first love. But what I love about the recital space, the concert space, which is a much smaller space, is that you have an more intimate relationship with your audience. They see everything, they hear everything, and then particularly in pieces like African Queens, they feel a part of it. Right. And they don't feel like they're watching it. Like in opera, you feel like you're watching it versus being a part of it. And I think in the recital space, the intimacy allows the audience to feel a part of it, which is how you touch people in a very different way. But I do love chamber music and recitals, because you can tweak what doesn't work. You can, because the show is slightly different than it was when we premiered it in Ravinia. and some things didn't work as well. And so what I did was I went back and I fixed a couple of things. And in opera, you really can't do that as swiftly. But and you get to and in recital space you can see your audiences, and you know what works and what doesn't work, what they respond to. The Santa Barbara audience surprised me a lot because I was not expecting them to be as vocal as they were. We had a lot of ums and ahs, and like it was a very like in Black culture we're used to that. If you the response, the call and response, the immediate reaction to what it is that we did, and I was not expecting the Grand Santa Barbara audience to. They surprised me. They it was amazing experience. Again, you can hear all of that. You can get all of that back immediately in a much more intimate space.
And if you want to get all of that history in an intimate space, you have an opportunity on July 27th to see it up close in person at Tanglewood. African Queens is the name of the program. We've been talking with soprano Karen Slack about this amazing program and bringing it to Western Mass. I'm so excited about this. It's going to be amazing.
Thank you. I'm excited too. You got me hype. I'm up here in Banff now, teaching. That's where I teach in the summertime, teach voice. And so coming back from a really wonderful weekend and then like getting back into the groove of things, like this interview has just got me so excited.
Oh, yay!
Tanglewood, which is such a beautiful, beautiful place. I mean, my God, Tanglewood. But I'm excited about, was it next week?
Yeah, it's
Sunday.
It's on Sunday.
Yeah.
You'll be great.
You'll be amazing.
Thank you.
A little sickening of the years, the tribute of a few hot tears.
Yeah, this is a section from the Queen Nani lullaby, one of the two in the program, and you can see previews of it on her Instagram page. It's all going to be fantastic. You can get tickets to the Tanglewood one-night only performance of African Queens this Sunday, July 27th at bso.org. And if you're curious about that Carmen performance that she watched with Denise and Placido Domingo as Don Jose, the full thing is available on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing.
Very cool. Now to see if we're using pretty the right way, or if pretty's place in our language is pretty precarious. With Word Nerd Emily Brewster.
You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, dedicated to creating access to financial well-being for local people, businesses, and communities. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Since we're in the middle of a fund drive, and since listeners are calling and telling us all sorts of things about why they think public radio and public media is important, maybe we'll do a listener question from the Word Nerd, Emily Brewster, our resident wordster from Merriam Webster, the dictionary in Springfield. And this comes from listener Michael E. Clark, who writes, each week when I hear the Word Nerd on Wednesday, I've been thinking of the word pretty. How has this word become an adjective to modify anything? Not the modifier which describes objects, people, flower, gardens, clothing, etc. It is similar to the usage of wicked by our friends in the 617 area code, which we migrated over here. I can't stop. I'll never, stop, won't stop.
Just always going to say wicked.
Yeah.
And after years of being staunchly against it, it showed up in my vocabulary, unwanted, unneeded, and constantly used.
Well, I heard somebody say that once you use the word wicked like that, you'll never escape Massachusetts, and I use it proudly. But keep up the great work, interviews, and visiting locales in the 413. Best regards, Michael E. Clark.
It's a pretty good question.
Yeah, who ends it with a quote. Life is a steady, unwavering journey between two hospitals. As we age, the doctor's visits become more frequent, thus becoming a blur beyond recognition. Michael, the sage elder bison herder.
That's not true for my partner, but...
Yeah, at any rate. Pretty good question there.
That's what I said.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was too busy trying to interpret what Michael, the sage Elson bison herder was all about. Talk about pretty in the way that we use wicked, which essentially means very.
Yes.
That's right.
For emphasis.
Wicked essentially means very. That use dates to 1980, according to our current evidence.
Which does wicked?
Yes,
Really?
the adverbial. It's actually an adverb in that case. It means very
Right.
or extremely, right? That dates to 1980. Meanwhile, wicked, as it describes witches, etc., unfairly, of course, is 13th century.
Wow.
Are people born wicked? Or do they have wickedness thrust upon them?
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's wicked
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I remember somebody
But-
criticizing me using wicked that way when I was in high school, saying you shouldn't use the word wicked because it has evil connotations. It doesn't mean what you say it means. And I said, well, it'd be awfully good for me to try to rethink my language at this point. Sick linguistic burn. But
Totally,
What
yeah,
about
yeah.
what about pretty in this regard, Emily Brewster?
Well, pretty has been an adverb since as early as 1565 is the date of the current evidence.
Whoa.
In uses like pretty cold.
Right.
And there it means moderately, but just a slight shift from there, it can mean quite or even extremely, like, ooh, that's a pretty bad burn.
Yeah.
Right. And that came very soon after. Pretty as an adverb didn't start to describe things that were done prettily until the early 17th century.
Wait, so pretty in this form that Michael E. Clarke is taking some umbrage with is older than pretty, meaning it looks beautiful?
Meaning beautiful?
Well, then the adverb, if you're going to say
Okay.
sing pretty.
Oh,
Right.
like sing prettily. Right. Okay.
Right. Yes. But if we're talking about something being pleasing, like a pretty garden or something like that, that is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old. So,
Okay.
but the earliest meaning of the adjective pretty was artful or clever. So, and it typically described a person who was especially clever. So, like, oh, what a pretty fellow that is.
So that had nothing to do with their appearance. It had to do with their level of cleverness.
Yeah. And the word goes all the way back. Its origin is a word meaning trick. The word prat meaning trick.
Ah.
As in pratfall.
Yes, except that pratfall has an entirely different etymology. And I was so disappointed about this because I was really hoping that pretty was somehow related to prat as in pratfall. But that prat in pratfall actually means buttocks.
So when somebody calls somebody a prat, I'm assuming that etymology is the same as the pratfall buttocks
Yes.
etymology.
But there are hundreds of years between the two, which I think is very strange.
Yes.
So even we've talked before about Gross's Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue, which
love
is
it.
one of the best slang dictionaries out there. He has a definition. He has an entry for prats, plural, meaning buttocks. But actually, the word was even old at that point, at the point of his dictionary, which was, the edition I have is 1811, but it actually goes back into the late 18th century. So as early back as 1560s, the word prat could mean buttocks. And it wasn't until 1955 that the word prat started to be used to refer to a stupid or foolish person.
Huh.
It took a long time.
Yeah, missed opportunity for all those years. Now I'm curious, though. There's Gross's Dictionary of Vulgar Terminology.
We've
Is that where we
talked
get the name gross? Calling something
No,
gross? Okay.
no. Right. This is Gross's Grose.
Okay.
He was just a linguist who put together one of the very earliest slang dictionaries, and it's his Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue. Vulgar meaning common, actually.
It's perfect in so many ways.
I know the title of that could not be better for its subject matter.
Gross.
It was like a garbage
Yeah,
pail
right?
kid.
Now, in the early 20th century, the word prat developed a specific use in the United States. The stupid or foolish person use is primarily British, like, oh, you prat. We've got examples in our unabridged dictionary from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and also a quote from Kingsley Amis, both using this British use of a stupid person. Like, we don't call stupid people prats. We have other words for them. But in U.S. criminal slang, the word prat was, at one point in the early 20th century, maybe it's still used this way, used to refer to the back pocket on somebody's pants.
Huh. Well, that makes sense because near your buttocks.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Put it in my pocket, put it in my pocket, in my back pocket, put it in my pocket, in my pocket, in my
Prat.
pocket.
Now, there's another word, prat, and this is where the convolutions sometimes get tangled in my mind. There's a Scots word, prat, meaning trick.
Yes.
And that word is not related to the buttocks word,
But it is related to pretty.
but it is possibly related to pretty.
In the early part of the 21st century, Pratt means an actor that somehow gets cast in every single role, especially voiceover animation.
You know, Mario does this little thing. He's like, he's kind of like this. He's a little more like this. And then Emmett Brickowski. Emmett is a little more like this. And then Garfield is kind of, he's like my own voice if I was about to yawn.
Right, yes. We don't cover that in the dictionary, though.
And that Pratt is pretty.
Yeah, he's all right.
He's a handsome-looking guy.
Yeah, he's all right.
Eye of the beholder.
Back to our listener question, Michael E. Clark's question about thinking of the word pretty. He's saying it's an adjective to modify anything. You're saying it's an adverbial use of this. It's really not like wicked, because when you say something is wicked good, it means it's better than pretty good.
Yes.
Pretty good is only a little bit good.
Yeah, pretty good is indicating an average, like a middling good.
And it is from a long time ago, and it is closer to the idea of this Pratt, right?
Of the trick.
The trick.
Yes. But I would argue that sometimes sometimes this adverbial pretty can mean, quite, or like when we say, oh, that's a pretty big problem you've got there.
Yeah.
I mean, wicked, there is semantic overlap between wicked and pretty in that use.
Right. But in that use, like pretty is kind of underplay. What is the term when you're underlying how serious the thing is? Usually when you say, like, that's a pretty big problem.
Yeah. It's almost hyperbolic.
Right.
Yes.
Or under hyperbolic.
That's the word I'm looking for, hyperbolic.
Yeah.
Or the opposite of hyperbolic.
Or the opposite of hyperbolic, yes.
Chilled out bolic.
Now, we also have an adjective pretty meaning miserable or terrible. Right, like like it's an ironic use, really. Like, oh, that's a pretty big mess you've gotten into. This is a pretty big problem,
Mm-hmm.
and that dates to the 16th century. So 400 years after pretty meant artful and clever, it started to take on this meaning of kind of like miserable or terrible. And this is the same time that the word fine took on the same kind of use. Like, oh, it's a pretty fine mess you've gotten into. It's a pretty mess you've gotten into. It's a fine mess you've gotten into. Those both come into use at exactly the same time, which I find curious.
Huh.
Fine also means pretty. If you say that person looks fine, you mean that person looks pretty.
He's so fine.
Yeah.
So, right, from the redundancy department of redundancies in English, right? We have all these words, all these ways of saying basically the same thing, and we just apparently like to have lots of variety.
Now we have two words that both mean something beautiful or pleasing, but also mean something terrible or something unwanted.
Throw wicked in there,
Right.
which is also terrible at times.
Yes, but wicked doesn't describe something that's like, by itself, you wouldn't use wicked to describe something that is necessarily like beautiful and have people understand it. At this point in time, I don't think.
No, I think that's right. But, bad in slang use can do the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not bad meaning bad, but bad meaning good.
Not bad meaning bad, but bad meaning good.
Well, I really thank listener Michael E. Clark for this question about the word pretty, and you as a listener can ask the Word Nerd questions as well at thefab413@nepm.org. Now we'll get back to trying to fix the pretty big hole we have in the NEPM budget, which is
the fine.
It's fine.
The fine, pretty hole that we have in the budget.
Everything's fine.
It's wicked. It's wicked. It's a wicked hole.
And it's not pretty.
No.
And it's not fine.
No. It is a gaping maw.
But thank you, Emily Brewster, for bringing this wisdom to our airwaves every week and answering listener questions like Michael E. Clark's. Michael, the sage elder bison herder.
I don't think they're the same person. But it's genuinely astounding that the use of these words in this way is so old.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Half a millennia we've been using pretty to mean this.
I think it's time we accept it.
Pretty pancake!
Thanks to Wayne and Garth for that outro music, and thanks to all the folks who've been contributing this hour. Anonymous in Deerfield contributing because it says, on Tyranny Lesson 2, defend institutions.
Hear.
Anonymous in Belchertown saying, real news without the fake bleep spewed by our leader. And Jim in Belchertown saying true and reliable news coverage is hard to find. NEPM is an invaluable resource.
So appreciated. And thanks to them for becoming sustaining members, for giving gifts to help us make up that gap that we now have since the CPB is going to dissolve in a few months, probably.
Yes. Well, on the next Fabulous 413, we head to the Triplex in Great Barrington, where they're encouraging the youth to pick up a camera and make movies of their own.
TriFest is currently accepting applications, and we'll talk with Salem Rabley about their drive to highlight the films made by those under 25 and showing her own work at the festival, and how the budding filmmaker in your life can submit their work for showing.
And U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern will join us as usual for Thursday. Got a question for him? Email us at thefab413@nepm.org. I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalees Smith. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.